Welcome to another program in our series, Freethinking Forum. I'm Bill Weir, the producer and host, and I'm delighted to have with me today Jay Hooper.
Wonderful to see you.
And Jay, you are an intern at the, a minister at the First Unitarian Society.
Yes, I
in
am.
Minneapolis.
Yes, I am. First time I've really been out here, and it's going to be a great summer.
Out here, you mean you haven't been off the coast of the East Coast?
I have not been off the East Coast out to Minneapolis, particularly here. I mean, and it's funny. I mean, to be in the home of Prince and which is one of the greatest musicians of all time. I am. Yeah, it's really awesome to be here. I mean, it's different for me. I've been here now for about 3 weeks, so I'm just getting very used to the energy.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Exposing yourself to these Midwestern values.
Yeah, not too bad.
Now, you have connections with the Ethical Culture Society, societies in numerous cities. And in a way, I think of First Unitarian Society here of being an ethical culture society.
You know that in this is, I would say that it is a home away from home. I often see my position as someone who is finishing up my leadership training with them. I see myself kind of as a clergy at large, and I'm constantly everywhere. I mean, wherever there's an ethical culture society, or wherever anytime someone is talking about humanism, if I'm there, it's home. And so I've enjoyed being a part of ethical culture. It's really offered me a great opportunity to share my points of views on humanism, challenge some new points of views.
That's important.
Yeah, right, and at the same time sharing language. A love language together, I think, which is very important for me, to sharing that love language together that allows for us to find new meanings, new values, and at the same time get to the real root of how we can ethically live together. And whether that is within a framework of just religious humanism or ethical humanism, I find it to be very, very important for us to be able to have a space in which people can come together and sharing each other's values.
Yes. Now, the Ethical Culture societies were founded by a distinguished leader.
Yeah, so ethical culture started in 1876. Brilliant young man by the name of Felix Adler.
Felix Adler.
Yes, Dr. Felix Adler, who actually also was a professor at Columbia College at the time, which is actually now Columbia University. And his work, as it relates to one of his publishings, is the ethical philosophy of life, and so he wrote and spoke in great spaces. I mean, he was speaking in Carnegie Hall, and he was able to fill up Carnegie Hall, and ended up later on having the actual building, which is kind of the mother building of us all, which was actually which is right off of West 64th Street and Central Park. And so this building is absolutely beautiful. It held just about 700 people.
And that was Carnegie Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And now Carnegie Hall is a little bigger.
Yes, it is. It's very big. Yeah, and so that's the thing. It's amazing how this space was converted to do this work around that, where he found a need for people to connect around issues and topics that affected their daily life without really having to put forth the need for theism.
Or deism.
Yeah, or deism, right? All of these things. So I think that it was. I think it was a brilliant move. It was a brilliant move for a time that was seeking a lot of answers in a time of deep war, and at the same time, at a time of also European immigrants who were coming over and also exploring New York too, right? So all of that was still being figured out. I mean, he created a space that was a beacon for people needing belonging. And I think that's something beautiful about ethical culture. It can be that space that really speaks to our belonging, no matter where we come from, no matter what walk of life we are, no matter what we believe and how we are, how we grew up. It's something about when you have a space that speaks to not only just who you are ethically but also culturally.
Yeah. Now, how does the word ethical culture fit in? Is there a nationwide association?
Yeah, so our national umbrella is the American Ethical Union. This was established, I think, if I remember correctly, or in the 1900s as well. I think around about 1950. But the council had gotten together to really actually establish, to really, because as the movement was growing, it was a little bit of everywhere, from New York to Baltimore, from Baltimore to Philadelphia. It had even reached to California, and also a place, Conway, which was in London. And so ethical culture had grown, and so the American Ethical Union was established as kind of the umbrella, for the ethical culture societies.
So you mentioned East Coast cities,
Mm-hmm.
and saying in general there's something on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But isn't there a big one in St. Louis?
St. Louis is one of our biggest. We do have one of our biggest congregational spaces. It is between St. Louis now and
Jefferson City?
no,
Or Kansas City?
no. It's Washington D.C. is the second largest. So Washington D.C. and St. Louis are the largest as congregations.
I see.
Yeah.
I thought you meant they'd moved out of.
Oh no, I don't even know St. Louis that well to even tell you geographically where we would be, but because I'm definitely not a Midwest person. I've been on the East Coast and I've been on the West, but in between.
I hope you learn the geography.
Yeah, we'll get it.
It seems to me that many people in Minnesota would be attracted to an ethical culture society.
I would assume so. I mean, definitely with the Minneapolis society here, and the language that is constantly being developed. I mean, an ethical culture society here, I could see really blossom. I think what needs to come about now is figuring out what is the importance of congregation. For a lot of, particular in this time, in this season, where we do have a lot more individuals that are in their 30s and 40s.
With children.
Yeah, right, with children, some with children, right? I myself am not a person who has children, but, I often tell people, like, I don't, why would you come to a congregation? What is the point?
So many people come when they feel their children need some kind of education into philosophy, religion, something, socializing with other children who share their views.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I also think that there's this other component of where, like, in my case, I don't have, me and my partner, we don't have children, but she and I, we enjoy ethical culture on the grounds that we actually like to still be involved in congregation. We grew up in congregations. We both grew up in Christian congregations. And so family value of just, having togetherness and spending time with people within the community was important. So it's very different.
And where was that?
Part of my life, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. And so I went to a Holiness Church. I was raised Pentecostal. So I come from the evangelical tradition. Just
like our minister.
Yes, I'm very similar to Dr. Breeden. He's we share that vein, and so I myself, growing up in Richmond, had the experience of the Holiness tradition, and I think in many ways it set me up for not only just the work that I do as clergy, but it did set me up for places like ethical culture and humanism.
Really?
Yeah. I can honestly say, even with a lot of God talk, there's something very interesting about talking about holiness and this idea of kind of if you will, kind of if I'm going to get theological with it, kind of a pneumatology, if you will, like this idea of spirit, just spirit in general.
Oh, yes.
Right? That
Pneumatology, nothing to do with numbers.
nothing to do with numbers.
It's the spirit.
It's the spirit, right? And this idea of the spirit, and so so pneuma, coming from the Greek, is air,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so this idea of the study of air, maybe the study of spirit, if you break it down in that way. The funny thing is that as I studied at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, I loved mysticism. I was studying many different traditions around mysticism. I was looking at the Kabbalah, and I was looking at Pentecost, and I was looking at, I was just going in. I was looking at the Shaktipat and enjoying Sufism, and I was enjoying ideas of mysticism to the point where I was like, this is very interesting frameworks of spirit. And then it was interesting to think for a moment, here is a place where, in the end, what is our mysticism? What was our thing that we brought? Humanism brings enthusiasm.
Yes.
Right? And that was to me, that was the greatest mysticism that we had as humanists. And I understood that because I had been in a Pentecostal church, always expressing myself and always sharing enthusiasm. It wasn't just this idea of praise for me. It was really an idea of really like, I get a chance to get excited about life. And I think, and so for me,
And I admire that excitement.
Yeah, thank you. And that was the thing that brought me really into the understanding of humanism for myself. And I was like, oh, this is easy. This is very easy for me because I understand the enjoyment of life. I enjoy the fullness of it. And at the same time, I love to explore it. In many ways, I had established, with my own curiosity, in many ways, a kind of a holy curiosity. I was always curious about something going on, and I wanted to create something out of nothing. I mean, that was me as an artist. So,
Yes, you're also an artist.
Yeah.
Visual arts.
Mm-hmm. And so just that alone, that really set the premise for me, going into ethical culture, bringing in different viewpoints, sharing in interreligious conversation, intercultural conversation, doing work around justice, thinking about liberation constantly. And when I think about liberation, I'm always grateful for the years that at the time I studied systematic theology with Dr. James Baldwin, and rest his soul and who he was. If it was not for his framework on Black liberation theology and his influence, I honestly cannot say I would probably still be doing this work. It has a lot to do with him and people like Dr. Cornel West and James Forbes that have really influenced me. If I think about my Black great patriarchs to doing this work.
Mm-hmm. Now, what books of these three written that we might give attention to?
I know, right? Race Matters by Dr. Cornel West.
Race Matters.
Whose Gospel? Dr. James Forbes.
Whose Gospel by Dr. James Forbes.
Mm-hmm. And one of my all-time favorites is The Spirituals and the Blues by Dr. James Cone.
Oh, and that brings out the musical.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, he has a good way of talking in that piece about basically bridging the spiritual music, the Negro spiritual and blues, and then he begins to play with the Negro spiritual as an idea and a concept of hope, and the blues as a reality to that hope, as an actual natural secular reality. And so he marries them together in the text and begins to develop a conversation of how both are developed through the black body and the black politics of life.
And will you be speaking about what you've learned from these books?
Oh, I speak about them so much. I even write about them in my dissertation. I do. While I'm here, I'll be doing a lot of work around interreligious engagement, and not particularly within the mainstream religions, but particularly those religions that were oppressed and kept from people who were enslaved. So I will be talking about ideas and frameworks of Yoruba, also influences of Buddha.
Yoruba?
Mm-hmm.
And that is covers.
That's in the East. That's in the East African. That will cover ideas of Santeria, Candomblé, as well as Voodoo. And so I'll be talking about those because those have not had a lot of play in the mainstream.
And does that include Somalia?
We will.
Kenya?
Basically, Kenya has a different. I don't think those are the same. Yoruba doesn't travel. That region, Yoruba land itself, that region is only designated to Nigeria, to Togo.
That's.
Yeah, so it's all East Africa.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have I got my
Your geography?
I thought it was West Africa.
I'm sorry. Yes, West Africa. Ooh, had a moment. Yeah, I meant to say West Africa. Thank you. I'm messing up my own geography. Yes, so all of West Africa, from Nigeria. Yes, Togo, and yeah. Now that I'm seeing a map in my head.
Good. We'll get you geographically oriented.
Yeah, I know, right? I've been moved over to the center of the United States. I'm a little confused.
Well, maybe I should ask you what brought you to humanism. Would you care to say more about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think if anything, humanism for me brought me to a very unique place. Well, first of all, I ended up stumbling upon the architecture of humanism because of the fact that it looked like a Frank Lloyd Wright building. Because when I first saw it, I was like, what is this place? So it was ethical culture, and ethical culture expanded further on what humanism was for me. So one of the things is that what brought me to humanism was the need to really want to have moral courage to really practice it and do it without having to use God to justify somebody's humanity. I found that it would be, in some way, it was lazy to use theology to just affirm someone's humanity, and that is not to negate anyone who does theological work, but after a while, to theologize love did not make as much sense to me, and in some way, humanism freed up that space, so you didn't have to use God talk to ensure that a human being had rights and access to basic civil practices.
Yeah.
I found that humanism gave me that ability to do that. I also found that even within the humanist space, that science was a big thing within many of the congregations I worked with. I even found I was like, do we have to theorize? Do we have to, basically sit back and read philosophy and all of these other things just to treat people right? I just really was, and I thought it was interesting because in many ways our spaces, and I can speak from a place of ethical culture. It is rooted in the educational elite, and so in many ways you are degree bound
with science.
Yeah, with science, or even not even that. Some of my colleagues are very well versed in not only just science, but they're versed in anthropology.
The arts.
They are,
and the social science.
Yeah, and so all of these social sciences and so on and so forth. And I wasn't that person. I mean, honestly, my degree, my background, before even theology, I tell people, before I'm a theologian and before I'm clergy, I'm an artist. I will probably disrupt, just like James Baldwin says. I'm the artist who's probably here to disturb the peace, right? I am always interested in bringing in an eye related to aesthetics. Mm-hmm. What my all-time question in approaching my ethic is, what does beauty look like?
Well, I'm sorry. I have a background of a clutter of magazines and books, and that is no way art. Next time we'll have to have some of your big pieces of art behind you.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the things that honestly, like if we're really going to do this work in the world, I think one of the biggest things that we have to ask ourselves is how we constantly reimagine our systems. Reimagining is key to creating a better hope for people. And I think it's one thing to have all these wonderful degrees and knowledge that can inform us, but it is also important for us to be absolutely co-creators of the world and share in that.
Well, I consider myself a co-creator of the world.
Yeah, right, and right. So to be this curator of culture is vital, and so I find that to be very, very important.
I wish more people shared this view.
Yeah.
Because in many cases they espouse love and justice, but they don't also value the power they have to create love and justice.
Yes, that's exactly. And for me, that is where humanism is important. Humanism is for me less about what goes in my head and more about what comes through my body. So how I share these things, how I engage these things, how I interact with things, how I allow for change to show up, comes through, through my hands or through what I might say, how I might act towards my neighbor or my friend or that person who I might first identify as a stranger and welcome them. I find that those are things that honestly a book can't teach you. No classroom that you sit in and gain credits for can teach you.
But here at First Unitarian Society, we have ministry to children. Mm-hmm. We bring them together in their age groups, and this helps them socialize in a way that they learn to practice the humanist values.
Yeah, and I think that I myself, I was a teacher for 13 years. I love the classroom. The classroom is only a microcosm, small space, a very, very big world.
Aren't we all?
Right? I know, right? Then we're in a smaller space in a bigger world, right? And I find that I've found often, even when I was teaching art to children, there was nothing more powerful than taking them outside to show them how to draw the world around them. And so I value the classroom space, but I think a lot of times we have to go beyond the classroom, and I think that many times we do have to see those embodied practices.
Yes.
And if the classroom itself can provide that, then the world becomes nothing but an actual, real, larger classroom for them to engage with. Which is why I do appreciate when our children do learn, how to engage and embody these practices. But I really believe that even today, as I watch adults who sit back and read, and they can tell me every quote. They can tell me how to deal with systemic racism. They can tell me how to deal with ideas of homophobia or heterosexism. They can tell me how to deal with classism and all these other. They've read so many books. But it's so funny. The interaction is still very aloof and still very distant.
What?
Because it is because the
not-
idea of compassion comes through knowledge. It's not within the body. So there's a struggle there. Because I can tell you how many humanists that will 9 times out of 10 hug. Because they might, some of them are very uncomfortable with hugging.
Yeah.
You know, some of them are not as personable as you and I. You know, and so that, and for other individuals, they might need that connection. Human, real connection. Sometimes it's okay to touch a friend and say, hey, you okay? I've watched, you know, and I've seen it. So I really want to see us get to a place where we really establish real relationship, real meaningful, healthy relationships that allow for us to reach beyond just our minds, but also allow for us to embody what is in our minds so that we can show it.
Yeah.
That's a real performance.
Something more than a handshake.
Something, yes, that's exactly. I want something more than a handshake. That's my humanism.
But not invading.
Always with consent.
Yes. And you have a lot of wisdom, Jay. And I'm wondering what else you can share with us today.
Oh, I mean, you know, I think at this point in my life, and thank you for that, I would have never imagined the places that I'm in today. I would have never expected to be where I'm at today. The fact that I'm getting a doctoral degree at Ohio University and focusing on African arts and literature as well as theater, and to embody and to also do what I love to do. I mean, I love working from a clerical capacity. At the same time, I love doing art. I mean, that's very seldom that those things are married together. And from when I grew up, it was normal for a pastor to basically come and preach on a Sunday and then work his other job. I never knew anything about clergy actually as a profession. It was something that you did freely. Ministry was freely done. So you allotted time to do the work that you were called to do for the world. So that was a very different thing. I never thought about that and did not grow up in an environment where I had to think about it as a career, because that was not a way that you made a living. That was a way that you served people.
Yeah.
And then I had the opportunity to also, my mother deeply encouraged me to constantly, be an artist. Now, that's not everybody's story, because some people are told not to be an artist because there's no money in being an artist. And I actually had the opportunity to fall in love with what I was learning. I was an artist, and so I think, if anything, to as I've pulled those together and then brought that together with my theology, to bring that together with organizational development, and all of these things I'm even bringing into the internship here. And I'm sharing with Dr. Breeden a lot of my experience and things, and I'm so grateful for this setting and for this congregational component, because it has been probably one of the most uplifting times. I think it is the first time that I've actually, in any of the internships I've ever been in, this is the first time I've actually been able to see myself.
You've shared so much. I think we might have an hour's worth of...
That's all right.
So, thank you so much,
Thank you
Jay.
so much. I appreciate it.
Jay Hooper, the ministerial intern with First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
And going on to ethical culture societies around the world.
Yes. We're gonna reach the world. We are gonna reach the world. We are.